I stepped onto my ferry and heard it. "Why is that old barnacle here? We're at capacity." My daughter-in-law, on my deck. Her laminate glittered harbor trust partner and my heirlooms were gone. Their schedule read, Q&A with Lila, if she behaves. At sunset, I returned with the fire marshal and a secret I'd kept for a decade. "Behave?" I whispered. "Watch me." Then, to the cameras. "My name is Rosalind Gray." The river went silent. Fireworks over fuel, forged papers, and one choice: family or the truth. River mornings speak in small sounds. Rope whisper through a cleat, gulls laughing, the Rosalind's hull sighing as the current changes its mind. Today the river's voice is buried beneath a rented bass that thumps like a fake heart. I step onto my gangway and a young woman in a neon headset points a clipboard at me. "Why is that old barnacle here? We are at capacity." It is my daughter-in-law, Tamsin, and somehow on my deck I am treated like a trespasser. "Good morning to you," I say, because manners are armor. This barnacle owns the boat. She spins a laminate on her chest so it flashes like a badge. It reads Harbor Trust Partner in shiny blue, as if holograms can bless a lie. Adrian cleared it, she says brightly. "We are mid-setup, Lila. No room for drop-ins." I look past her to my teak benches crowded with strangers staging sincerity in soft voices that sound like bedtime stories for adults. Tripods sprout like metal reeds. Ring lights wash my wheelhouse in artificial halo. An assistant pads by wearing the old varnish apron I keep for winter touch-ups. "Excuse me," I say, catching the strap. "Where did you get that?" She startles, glances at Tamsin, and murmurs, "From the cabinet." "Put it back," I tell her. "And wash it first. That varnish is older than you." The girl flees, swiping glitter from her cheek like guilt could shimmer. Tamsin leans close enough that I smell citrus oil. "Lila, be kind to yourself," she says, voice sharpened for microphones. "We are elevating your legacy. The summit gives people access." I let the river steady my breath. "Access is not ownership," I answer. "Ownership comes with keys, repairs, and taxes." Her smile brightens. "And stories. Imagine the Q&A. You will be adorable." I blink once. "I am not a mascot," I say. "I am the captain who paid every bolt in cash." She widens her stance as if she is planting a flag on my deck. "We have hard limits," she declares. "We have sponsors arriving. We cannot manage extras." "Extras," I repeat. The word tastes like rust. "This is my home on water." She taps her laminate. "The trust knows we are here." I see the hologram catch the sun and throw back a cheap rainbow. "Holograms do not sign permits," I say. "People do. People who know me." A woman in linen announces, "This light is perfect for the gratitude circle." I look at my mosaic table, the river of blue glass I set during the winter my grief would not thaw. A ring light paints it a counterfeit moon. I feel a strange heat at the base of my throat. "Gratitude for what?" I ask. Tamsin smiles with all teeth. "For access, Lila." "No," I say, softly. "For access, you ask. You do not invade." The DJ raises 2 fingers toward me like we share a joke. I will not give him one. I step back onto the pier, and the boards remember my weight. "I will come back," I tell Tamsin, my voice even. "Try not to break what you do not understand," she calls after me, bright as a siren. "Do not be difficult, Lila. Adrian said you would not make this ugly." I do not turn. "Ugly already happened," I say. "You just added speakers." I walk the pilings like prayers, counting them as I did the year I bought the Rosalind in rust and stubbornness. Each post is a promise I kept after widowhood. Learn the water, learn the tools, learn the quiet. By the 4th, I pause and look back. From here, my boat seems to be wearing someone else's expression, like a friend forced to smile for a bad picture. I swallow the impulse to call the police and choose waiting instead. Dawn lets me move like I used to on night runs. I return with an easy lie in my mouth. I left my medication in the captain's locker. The assistant with my apron blinks, unsure whether elders count as inventory. The deck is a quiet wreck of yesterday's ambition. Empty cups, half stickers, and a smell like burned sugar and hair. Inside, the air is a fog of aerosol and spilled kombucha, sweet, sharp, and wrong. My mosaic table waits under an intentional scatter of glitter, a counterfeit galaxy pressed into grout. "Who did this to you?" I murmur, patting a shard of bottle blue. The wheelhouse holds a forest of tripods, legs braced like they expect wind. I cross to the captain's locker. The latch is splintered, a small sun of broken wood around the plate. Someone pried what only I have the right to open. My jaw goes tight the way storms do. Inside the locker, my logbooks lie dumped like old news. The velvet pouch that cradled my mother's brass compass gapes empty, the shape of absence punched into cloth. "Where is it?" I ask the boat, because the river taught me to ask first and rage second. I find a folder under a stack of brand guidelines. The title reads, "Transfer of Custodianship, Draft." A board memo inside bears a signature that looks like handwriting until you actually look. My name is missing where it should sing. The seal is a photocopy ghost. The language tries to sound official but does not know the habits of real authority. Another sheet pretends to be a permit for a charity gala hosted by River Rise Collective, a non-profit that arrived from nowhere and claims my deck as if it were a stage rental. The contract that follows promises a sponsor a naming moment once my ferry is reassigned. The word reassigned strikes me harder than the insult did. Permits talk about times and loads. Reassignment talks about erasing a life. "Not today," I tell the locker. The tablet on my chart shelf wakes with one touch. A run of show fills the screen in tidy lines. Breathwork, journaling, sponsor reveal, then fireworks over the fuel lines at 8:10. A note near the end says, "Q&A with Lila if she behaves." I laugh, but very quietly, because the river listens for the truth inside your noise. "If I behave," I repeat, and the words taste like someone else's teeth in my mouth. I take photos of everything, slow and careful. The way you mark shoals on a hand-drawn chart, the splintered latch, the empty pouch, the counterfeit permit. The contract that reads like a mirror taught to lie. My hands stop shaking once I start cataloging. I step back onto the deck, and the river gives me a small wind that smells like iron and mint. In the far corner, the assistant has draped a towel over my compass shelf, maybe to hide the gap, maybe to stage a photo. I lift the towel and dangle it in my fingers. "You do not disguise theft with laundry," I say to no one in particular. The boat creaks, shy and loyal, as if she agrees. Footsteps thud on the pier. I do not want a scene, so I pocket the tablet photos and slip past a banner that reads, "Breathe by the Bend" in a font that pretends to be kind. The dock is still blue with dawn, and the harbor office light glows like a patient eye. I walk toward it and count the pilings again. 4 promises, then 5. By 6, I have decided exactly how I will answer. I choose the quiet fight. Paper before shouting, allies before anger, evidence before applause. At golden hour I will return with truth and tide. "Behave?" I whisper to the river. "Watch me." The water answers in silver yeses. The harbor office keeps river hours open when the light is honest and the wind doesn't lie. Brass bells hang above the door. A salt map of the Bend curls gently on the wall. A kettle ticks somewhere out of sight. Noor Rahman looks up from a ledger with that priestly calm he wears when the water misbehaves. "Captain," he says, standing. I set my folder on the counter. "Not today," I answer. "Today I am simply the owner of a boat everyone else thinks is a stage." He gestures to the back desk. "Bring the papers. Let's see what the river has to say." He reads without talking, which is why I trust him. The laminate in the photo harbor trust partner earns only the smallest tightening at the corners of his eyes. He turns the forged memo under the desk lamp, then brushes a fingertip along the photocopied seal. "Paper that lies leaves fingerprints," he murmurs. "Who told them they could borrow your life?" I point to the line that promises a sponsor naming moment after reassignment. No one who knows the word custodian means care, not conquest, I say. Noor nods toward the terminal. "Let's pull the records." The old computer wakes with a humming patience. Noor types like he is coaxing stories from stone. Lines of approvals scroll past mooring renewals, routine maintenance, that poetry night I hosted for my sister last spring. He filters by vessel, by date, by event. "No permit for today," he says. Click. "No charity registration under River Rise Collective in our harbor system." Click. No trust partnership on file for your deck this quarter. He swivels the screen toward me, factual as a tide table. See, the only name linked to the Rosalind is yours. Good, I say. Let's make it louder. We examine the memo again. Noor lays it beside an authentic board letter. Spacing is wrong, he notes. Signature lacks the chair's habitual pressure on the downstroke, even the margins pretend. I tap the clause that cites an invented bylaw. Imaginary law, I say. Real theft. Noor rubs his jaw. We'll want the gangway camera and the fuel dock feed. He slides a form across the counter. Sign so I can release copies to counsel. I sign, and the desk lamp throws our two shadows onto the curling map, mine steady, his steady, the river line between us. Call Sabine, Noor says. Sabine Cho answers on the first ring like people do when they've already decided to help. Mrs. Moreno, she says, voice crisp and unhurried. I'm 10 minutes out. When she arrives, she shakes my hand with dry, workmanlike warmth and opens a slim folio. Noor briefs her succinctly. Forged memo, counterfeit partnership claim, planned fireworks over fuel, a Q&A with Lila if she behaves. Sabine's eyebrow lifts by a millimeter. Conditioning access to the owner, she says. Charming. She compares the memo to Noor's exemplars, then takes photographs with a small flat camera. Misrepresentation, unauthorized commercial use, safety risk. We'll address all three. Start with the match near the gasoline, I say. Sabine nods. Fire marshal first call, she says, writing. Harbor police second. A cease-use order for the event, drafted in my office and served on deck. We'll secure chain of custody for every exhibit: your photos, Noor's logs, camera files, the forged memo. She looks at me. You will keep your voice low and your posture high. Let the documents speak. Rage makes bad law. I smile despite myself. I've spent a lifetime not yelling at weather, I say. I can manage people. She caps her pen. Then let's make them listen. I pull my phone from my pocket. One more call, I say. Noor's glance is sympathetic. Sabine's is neutral, which is its own mercy. Adrian answers in his gentle office voice. Hey, Mom, Tamsin says you're upset. I am precise, I reply. Precision is what you call a bridge that does not fall down. He chuckles like I've made a small mistake he can fix. Look, it's visibility. A summit, press, sponsors. The trust is thrilled. The trust knows nothing about this, I say. And visibility without consent is a floodlight in a stranger's window. His sigh goes thin. Please don't make a scene. Put me on speaker, Tamsin says, arriving like a siren. The line clicks. Lila, we love you, she declares, brightness sharpened to a point. But you get confused under stress. We're handling the heavy lifts. I lift coils heavier than your ring lights, I say. And my memory has better ballast than your laminates. Harbor Trust Partner isn't a laminate, she snaps. It's access. It is plastic, I answer. Mine is ownership. Adrian tries a soothing tone. Can't we host you in this? You tell your story, everyone wins. I will not be hosted in my own wheelhouse, I say. Everyone winning requires honesty. Mom, he says, I'm trying to be the adult here. Then do the adult thing, I reply softly. Ask permission. Respect, no. Tamsin breaks in, impatient. We have sponsors waiting. Your resistance makes us look disorganized. Your forgery makes you criminals, I say. Silence. I let it hold. I'll see you at sunset, I add. Adrian panics a little. Why sunset? Because light reveals, I answer. Tamsin laughs, brittle. We are all about light, Lila. Then you won't mind standing in it, I say, and end the call before my heart can do something sentimental and foolish. Sabine has already drafted the skeleton of a cease-use order. I'll polish and print back at my office, she says. Harbor Police will meet us at your slip at golden hour. Fire Marshal will be present, not as a performance, but because sparks and fuel lines are unromantic together. Noor prints release forms for data. Fuel dock CCTV runs clean, he says. Gangway camera sometimes picks up more than wind. We'll pull both. He lowers his voice. And I have redundancies. Redundancies save boats, I say, which is true of hardware and people. Sabine slides a checklist across the counter. Your tasks. Revoke any access you've given, she says. Codes, keys, soft permissions. I nod. No keys given, I say. They picked my lock. Then we change it, she answers. Also, gather receipts for every bolt, every tile, every tube of marine adhesive ownership documented and incontestable. I picture the plastic tubs in my hall closet, labeled in my careful block letters. Fasteners, electrical, finishes, wood. I picture the accordion folder of vendor invoices, the 3 paper cuts that taught me where to hold. I have it all, I say. She smiles once. Of course you do. Noor taps the terminal. Mooring logs pulled, he says. USB in 5. I drive home and pull the tubs like I'm hauling treasure from a wreck. The accordion folder snaps open with the sound of a deck board settling. Receipts smell like the years that made them salt, glue, Sunday. I stack them by category and date. Bronze screws, oak planks, safety rails, non-skid paint, glass tile, gasket kits. I tuck the original survey behind the deed, then add printouts of the maintenance logs I keep in a school notebook, each line a quiet vow, pump checked, bilge cleaned, wiring inspected. I take photographs of every stack. Redundancy is a virtue, spite is not. My hands calm further. Paper is ballast. Back at the harbor office, Noor hands me a flash drive labeled with the date and hour. Fuel dock and gangway, he says. I watch the thumbnails, there's motion where there shouldn't be. He places 2 stamped printouts beside it, the mooring log for the week, and a simple sheet that reads, in block letters, no event permit on file. People respect stamps, he mutters. Sabine texts, order ready. Police and fire confirmed. She follows it with a time, boarding at 6:57. Noor glances at the window, where afternoon is already leaning toward gold. Golden hour gives clarity without spectacle, he says, and the tide will be slack, fewer variables. We rehearse the boarding like a small play with no improvisation. Sabine will speak first, cease use order in hand. Harbor police will stand beside her, present but not theatrical. Fire marshal will conduct the safety findings aloud, short and dry. Overloaded circuits, blocked egress, prohibited pyrotechnics over fuel. Noor will handle the projector and the inventory sheets. My role is to speak only when asked, answer only in facts, and remain unshakable even if someone performs tears. If they try to turn this into content, Sabine warns, we do not feed the lens. I nod. The only show is the truth, I say. And the river. Before I leave, Noor asks the question good men ask. Do you want this quiet, Lila? I weigh it, because quiet used to be my first refuge. But then, I remember the laminate glittering like a toy badge, the counterfeit memo, the word reassignment curled like a hook. No, I say. I want it right. If right echoes, so be it. Sabine pockets her pen. Golden hour then, she says. Maximum visibility, minimum chaos. I slide the flash drive into my bag beside the receipts and the photographs and feel the boat steady in my chest. Sunset, I whisper. Show them who owns the light. By midday, the docks look like a parish after service, everyone lingering in the aisles, speaking softly so the river hears only the parts meant for it. Noor moves among the skippers in that careful way of his, checking cleats, checking faces, making sure age is not an invitation for someone else's hurry. He has become the dock's quiet guardian, a lighthouse with legs, and I have been grateful for that steadiness more times than I will say out loud. Years ago, when my winch seized in a squall, Noor slid onto my deck with a wrench, and a story about the time his own teacher took a socket to a storm. The trick, he said then, is not muscle but rhythm. Today he says nothing at first. He sets a mug of tea near my hand and lays a cloth over the folder I brought, as if the papers might catch a chill. Across the counter, 3 retired captains wait for permits of their own, listening without staring, doing the math of another person's trouble. Noor nods toward them and says quietly, We look after each other, Lila, even when we pretend we do not need it. I answer, I will take the looking after, Noor. And I will pay it forward with interest. Diego Santos drifts in on the smell of hose water and machine grease, cap pushed back, shyness riding his shoulders like a gull that has not decided to land. He clears his throat and glances at Noor before he looks at me. "Miss Moreno," he says, "can I show you something? But maybe you did not see it from last night?" I nod. He pulls a small drive from his pocket and sets it on the counter like a minnow wriggling in a tin boat. "Dash cam," he says. "Truck faces your slip." His eyes flick toward the door, toward some memory of promises and favors. "She told me there would be work if I looked the other way," he adds, nearly whispering. "Social coordinator, doc support, that kind of thing." "Who is she?" Noor asks, though we both know. "Tamsin," Deeg says, apologizing with his eyebrows. I did not say yes. I also did not say no. I touch the drive with one finger. "You said maybe," I tell him. "That is an honest word. Now say true." He nods once, the way men nod when the choice hurts but the answer has already arrived. Noor plugs the drive into the old machine and hums while the file names appear like little boats in a fog. He opens 1211 a.m., date stamp bright as a buoy. Grainy frames show Tamsin in a jacket, letting herself through my gate with a borrowed code, then crouching at the breaker panel with a roll of labels. She peels and sticks like a child moving names on a seating chart. Another clip shows boxes on a dolly, long trays marked for effects being dragged across the planks that cover the fuel lines. "That line is not a stage," I say. "That line breathes fire when insulted." Sabine is careful with the footage. She notes the time, the angle, the reflections in nearby windows that confirm position. "Chain of custody starts now," she says, and seals a copy in a fresh envelope with a handwriting across the flap that cannot be mistaken for anyone else's. Deeg exhales, relief and fear sharing a seat on his face. "Will she know it was me?" he asks. "She will know she was seen," Noor answers. "That is different." We build the first pass of evidence like a small wall against a rising tide. I print my photographs, the splintered latch, the sad son of broken wood, the velvet pouch with its mouth open and nothing inside, the tablet schedule with its tidy threat about fireworks and my behavior. Sabine slides plastic sleeves over each page and arranges them in a binder with tabs that satisfy something in me that likes order more than applause. "This will not be about drama," she says. "It will be about sequence." Noor adds the mooring logs and prints a clean sheet that says, simply, "No event permit on file." He stamps it with the small steel seal that makes even the river sit up straighter. Marla Voss does her first pass from across the pier, eyes moving the way firefighters' eyes move, seeing exits before furniture. She keeps her hands in her jacket pockets and counts under her breath as if measuring the room with a metronome. "Your aft stairs are half blocked by rental crates," she murmurs. "Power strips daisy-chained under a banner. That is a risk." She points with her chin rather than a finger. "If they load those spark trays over the line again, I will shut them down with or without the papers," she says, then adds, softer, "I am not here to make a show. I am here so no one burns." "Thank you," I say. "The river thanks you too." Back in the office, Sabine types the charity name into a browser and leans back while a pale website loads, all stock smiles and mission words that slide around like loose tiles. "Template," she says. Noor checks a registry for the number that proves a nonprofit is real. He shakes his head. No EIN, no filing, nothing but a name and a donation button that leads to a processor with another name. Sabine prints the page and circles the fine print where a third party takes a fee. "We will not litigate the internet," she says, "but we will show the absence of the one thing that matters, which is recognition. The opposite of recognition is erasure," I say. We do not wait long for the soft clash. The afternoon edges toward that forgiving light that makes even the gulls look generous. I walk the pier with Sabine and Noor at a polite distance, not a procession, more a current. Tamsin sees us and adjusts her headset like a crown. "We are at capacity," she announces again, grafting confidence onto a weary line. "Capacity for what?" I ask, calm as still water. "For this," she says, and gestures toward a schedule board filled with verbs that never had calluses. "Where is your permit?" I ask. "Show me the page where the trust welcomed you." She taps her laminate so it flashes like a fish. "You are the only person who keeps making this personal." "It is personal," I say. "You are on my deck." Adrian hurries over, face set in that management smile he thinks softens bad news. "Let us host you on your story," he says, hands open as if catching rain. "My story owns its chair," I answer. "It does not need a stage manager." Sabine stays back, watching angles and exits the way a chess player watches diagonals. She told me before we stepped aboard, "Ask for the permit, ask for the EIN, ask for the name of the approving officer. Then, stop. Who signed your approval?" I ask now. "Spell the name." Tamsin laughs, not merrily, more like a kettle pushed past its patience. "Lila," she says, "do not embarrass yourself." "The river and I have an arrangement," I say. "I do not embarrass myself on her deck." Adrian reaches for my elbow and stops when he remembers himself. "Please," he says, "let us de-escalate. We can adjust the plan. We can make space." "Space begins with respect," I answer. "Respect begins with law." Behind him, an assistant drops a crate on the aft stairs, and Marla, still across the pier, points without looking away. "Blocked egress," she says to no one in particular, and writes it down. Tamsin follows my gaze and moves the crate with a grimace that looks like charity but feels like theater. "See," she says, "we are responsive." "Permits are not a mood," I reply. "They are a fact." Sabine steps forward just enough to be seen. "We will return at sunset with paperwork," she says evenly. "Please do nothing that puts people at risk." Tamsin's smile chips. "We are risk managers," she says. Marla's voice carries from the pier. "Then stop adding cords to one outlet. We leave before the argument can grow teeth." Back in the office, Sabine opens the sponsor deck Tamsin sent to Adrian's contacts. Slides promise sunsets, community, and something called a naming moment. She reads the clause aloud so the walls hear it. Upon reassignment of custodianship, sponsor will enjoy brand reveal rights, including logo placement on asset and lead billing in all materials. She lowers the page. "They are not renting your deck," she says. "They are planning to rename your boat." Nor whistles once, soft as a match that decided not to light. "Custodian is a tender word," I say. They turned it into a crowbar. Sabine closes the binder and looks me in the eye. We set our watches. Preparation took the shape of hands. Mine, Sabine's, Noor's, each doing the right small thing without drama. We cleared a corner of the harbor office counter and turned it into a calm battlefield. Sabine arranged our evidence in an order that felt like a tide chart, inevitable lines leading toward a turn. "Every item gets a number," she said, uncapping a pen. "Every number gets a witness." I set down my photos one by one, the splintered latch, the bright halo of broken wood, the velvet pouch yawning empty, the tablet's run of show with its cheerful threat about fireworks and my behavior. Noor slid over a date stamp. "Let the paper keep time," he murmured, and the little red digits pressed the day into the corners like a seal. A notary from the next window brought her kit and took her place like a nurse prepping a tray. "Name?" she asked. "Lila Moreno," I answered. "Owner of the Rosalind." She watched my signature bloom on the affidavit, then pressed her stamp until the ink kissed fiber. Sabine initialed the margin and affixed a strip of tamper tape across the sleeve. "When they try to wiggle free," she said, "the seal remembers." Noor coaxed the office computer into patience and pulled the first half of what we needed, the fuel dock feed and the gangway camera, both with clocks that wandered by a minute and a half. He corrected the drift in ink beside the file names, exported clean copies, and handed me a fresh drive. "One lives here with Harbor," he said. "One travels with counsel. Redundancy means we sleep." Back at my slip, I changed the lock cores with the care you reserve for something that has already been hurt. 2 screws, a measured turn, the new cylinder answering with a satisfying click, the old one dropped into a bag marked OLD Retain. I installed 2 battery cameras beneath the eaves, tucked where habit forgets to look. One pointed at the breaker panel, the other guarding the wheelhouse door and the slice of deck where the trays had scraped across my fuel line cover. When the test lights blinked, I spoke into the quiet. "Work now, and tell the truth." The boat creaked, a private syllable. At home, I printed the deed and the parts of the trust charter that matter when lies try to wear good shoes. A yellow highlighter made a path through the clauses about reassignment authority, board vote or founding donor, no exceptions, no consent, no change. I underlined my own name where it hides and where it rules, because that was the point of the disguise all along, to keep decisions clean and keep men who loved me from treating a gift like a lever. The pages warmed under my palms. "Stand up," I told them. "I will hold you." Tamsin claimed a win that wasn't hers by lunch. My phone chimed, and there she was on my bow, dressed in approval like it was something you could order. "Approved by trust," the caption sang, floating over a loop of ring lights and careful smiles. She tapped the laminate on her chest until the hologram spat a rainbow. Another clip showed pyrotechnic trays rolling aboard on a dolly, responsible sparkle stuck to the plastic like a dare. She smiled into the lens and said, "Tonight is about community, gratitude by the water, fireworks if the wind agrees." I saved each video into a folder I named Falls Winds and whispered, "Keep talking." We moved through the next steps like a crew that knows each other's rhythms. Sabine logged my images, Noor's clips, and the forged papers into an evidence index that would satisfy the most suspicious clerk. The notary notarized, page after page, a steady press of authority. Sabine labeled each sleeve in block letters and had me initial across every piece of tape. "If someone peels," she said, "the tear will testify." Noor printed stills from the 2:11 a.m. footage and set them side by side with a photo he had taken months ago of my breaker panel. "Look," he said gently. Labels moved, loads disguised. The pictures hurt more than I expected. "That isn't fixing," I said. "That's makeup over a broken bone." The phone work gave us our third hand. Sabine found the laminate vendor in 2 calls, Lanyards and Lore, a prop house that sells authority by the dozen. I listened to her side of the conversation, impressed by a courtesy that never once retreated. "Yes," she said. "Purchase records for Reed Creative LLC, Harbor-style partner passes, quantity 10, correct? 4, content event. Please send the invoice and fulfillment confirmation." A minute later it arrived in her inbox. She printed it and circled the words that mattered, then wrote Exhibit L at the top. "L can stand for laminate," she said, "or for the lie they told their camera." While she printed, Noor's niece sent a message from the next room, where the young help harbor find itself online. "Is this yours?" she typed, attaching a vertical video from Tamsin's sister. The woman had filmed herself half confessional, half advertisement, praising hard work and river vibes. In the corner of her frame, behind a jar of glitter and a knotted scarf. My mother's brass compass blinked. I knew it by the notch. Pedro put in the hinge, the year the lid stuck after a storm. I paused the clip and angled the screen until the light hit the nick. "That's mine," I said. Sabine took 3 screenshots full, zoom, and detail and labeled the print Exhibit C. C for compass, she said. Also for conscience, currently missing. I stepped out onto the pier to breathe where the river still believes in straight talk. Deeg was hosing down a neighboring deck, the spray lifting silver into the air. He raised the nozzle in greeting. "Miss Moreno," he said, "you getting set?" "We are," I answered. "Thank you for the drive. It carried weight." His eyes softened. "She promised me hours," he confessed. "Said I'd be part of the team if I kept my head down. A job that asks you to look away is theft with a schedule," I told him. He nodded, relieved to have someone else name it. "I'll be around if you need me to explain that camera angle," he added. "People hear better when a mechanic talks about wires." "Stay close," I said. Close counts as courage today. When I returned to the office, the notary was packing her case, satisfied with our careful signatures. Sabine checked off boxes on a list that kept us honest. Images logged, video verified, drift corrected, drive sealed, notary seal present, owner initials visible. She handed me a second list with my tasks. New locks installed? Yes. Cameras set and tested? Yes. Deed and charter printed? Yes. Receipts organized by category and date? Yes. "You are a dream client," she said, not to flatter, but to place a brick where she needed a step. "Dreams work cheap," I answered. I prefer reality with a receipt. Noor snorted. Kind the way docs are kind, no applause, just the right tools handed at the right time. Tamsin's stories kept multiplying, brittle as ornaments. One showed the trays being positioned near the aft rail. Someone clapping in slow motion like approval could keep sparks from seeking fuel. Another panned across my mosaic table while a caption read, "We honor the past to build the now." Quit touching my grout, I muttered, but softly, because I have learned that air carries more than sound. Sabine took note of the timestamps and the geotags. They'll wish they posted less, she said. The internet will swear for us when the room tries to lie. Noor took me aside to the window where the water worked at the pier like a patient carpenter. We are setting a trap, he said. Not gleeful, just clear. A clean one that catches behavior, not bodies. I don't need vengeance, I told him. I need a boundary that people recognize even when I am not standing on it. He nodded. Lines are only lines until the community reads them as law, he said. Tonight we teach a reading lesson. I laughed once, a quick sound like rope snapping taut. Then let the lesson be public and polite, I said. Polite enough to hold. I went home for an hour because even soldiers need clean shirts. I laid out a jacket that remembers my shoulders and a pair of shoes that never argue with decks. On the counter, I placed the binder of receipts, sorted and labeled bronzy fasteners, electrical, wood, finishes, safety, so Sabine would have redundancy if anyone decided to misplace a folder. I tucked the deed and charter pages into a transparent sleeve, the yellow highlights like lit paths. Before I left, I wrote a single line on a sticky note and pressed it to the inside of my front door. Truth needs witnesses, not applause. Back at the slip, I watched two assistants zip-tie a banner across my aft stairs, then watched them take it down again after a woman in a linen blazer frowned. The constant rearranging had the feel of a child's lie, busy, inventive, never at rest. From the wheelhouse, I photographed the breaker panel again and compared it to Noor's stills. The new labels had a different hand, neater, strangely round. They claimed loads that didn't exist and hid the ones that could hurt. I set a cue card on the shelf beside the panel so I wouldn't forget the phrase I wanted when the time came. Names do not change currents. Sabine called the prop house once more to clarify fulfillment. Yes, she said into the phone as I leaned in to hear the tone. 10 partner passes, delivered last Wednesday to the dock entrance, paid by Reed Creative. Correct, the hologram pattern pictured on your site. Thank you. We have the PDF. She ended the call and looked at me. They bought the look of authority, she said. They did not realize authority keeps records. I thought of the compass blinking from that stranger's video and felt a steadier kind of anger settle into my bones. Thieves dress up, I said. The boat knows their shoes. Another ping. Noor's niece again, with a close-up of the compass from a second angle. The hinge nick was unmistakable. I used to press my thumb right there when the lid stuck, I said, not to anyone in particular. Sabine printed the still and clipped it to the growing row of sleeves. We will log the return when it happens, she said, and the chain will tell the truth about where it traveled and why. It traveled because someone thought I would blink, I said. I will not. We spent the last hour before sunset in quiet rehearsal. Sabine walked me through what would happen in what order, where I would stand, when I would speak, when I would let silence do the heavy lifting. Impactful sentences, not speeches, she advised. Windows the public can look through. This boat is mine. Permits are law, not moods. Safety before spectacle. I repeated them until they sat on my tongue without wobble. Noor checked the projector bulb and the cable that would run to his laptop. The clips load clean, he said. No stutter, no excuses. He slipped a spare bulb into his bag and patted it like a talisman. I am finished being surprised by electricity, he added, and we both smiled. I tightened the new lock once more and tested the cameras again, grateful for the invisible red dot that means memory has already started. The wind turned a quarter and brought me the river's ordinary breath, which felt like a benediction. Across the way, Tamsin lifted her phone and framed herself against my bow as if she had been born there. Grateful to partners, she said to her followers. Grateful to community, I whispered back. Grateful to paper. Grateful to time. The sky leaned toward gold, and the decks warmed to it, and the boat under my feet seemed to rise an inch with the tide, as if she was lifting her chin. "Last checklist," Sabine said, appearing at my elbow with the measured calm of a surgeon who likes the right music. "Evidence sealed?" "Sealed," I said. "Receipts staged?" "Staged. Locks changed, cameras recording, copies secured." "Yes. Courage steady." I looked out at the water, then at the wheel where my hands remember every turn that ever mattered. "Steady," I said. "Say the anchor line," she prompted. I tried one, the one that would matter when eyes were on me. "This vessel is my home and responsibility," I said. "Consent is the difference between honoring a story and stealing it." Noor tipped his cap, just once. "That line will hold," he said. We did not rush the remaining minutes. Tamsin's last preening story pinged through another boast about being approved, another pan across borrowed light. I took a screenshot and set the phone face down so I wouldn't grind my teeth. The dock mechanic's radio crackled, gulls traded insults over a crate of bait next door, and an old man in a red cap hummed a hymn to no one. The ordinary world had kept its rhythm while we built a frame for the truth to walk through. "When it comes," Noor said, "let it be simple." "Simple," I agreed, "and bright enough to read by." Golden hour poured a clean light across the bend as we stepped aboard in a small procession. Sabine with the order, 2 harbor police, Fire Marshal Marla, and Noor with a projector bag. The DJ slid his hand off the fader like a boy caught with a cookie. "Good evening," Sabine said. "I represent Miss Lila Moreno, owner of this vessel. We are serving a cease-use order for unauthorized commercial activity, misrepresentation, and documented safety violations." She handed the paper to Tamsin. It made a flat sound, like a door closing. Marla read next, her voice a metronome. "Findings: extension cords in chain, banner across the aft stairs, pyrotechnic trays staged over the fuel line path, no permit, no licensed operator. Shutdown recommended." The music died without anyone touching a switch. Tamsin lifted her laminate. "We are partners with the trust," she said, smile polished to a hard shine. I stepped forward and let the light find my face. "On the record," I said, "my name is Lila Moreno. On the trust charter, I am Rosalind Gray, the founding donor. Authority for any reassignment rests with the board and with me. You are not approved." A ripple moved through the guests. Adrian whispered, "Mom, please." I kept my eyes on the deck. "This is not a performance," I said. "This is the record." Noor set the projector and tapped a key. The wall bloomed with grainy night. "Fuel dock camera," he said. The timestamp glowed 2:11 a.m. We watched Tamsin unlock my wheelhouse, peel and swap labels on the breaker panel, then drag long boxes marked PYRO kits across the planks that cover the fuel line. "Why would I do that?" she said weakly. "To hide risk behind pretty names," Marla answered. "That is tampering." Sabine pointed to the order. "Commercial use ceases now." One officer spoke to the crowd. Phones down, exit calmly. Linen rustled. Ring lights dimmed. Noor handed inventory sheets to 2 dock hands. "Count what came aboard," he said. "Match what leaves." Adrian reached for me. "We can fix this in private." I shook my head. "Safety first, then truth." Marla lifted her clipboard. "Deck closed until hazards are corrected and lawfully permitted." The river exhaled. Control returned to its owner. Guests filed past me in a hush, and I stood at the rail, hand on paint, saying, "This is my line. It holds today." By morning, the dock had the after-sound of a church where the choir forgot a note. People spoke softer. The river went about its business. Online, however, the volume rose. Tamsin posted a statement wrapped in pastel borders and a tone that tried to pet the truth. "Our paperwork is in transit," she wrote. "A clerical delay created confusion. We were assured by my husband that the approvals were in place. We remain committed to community." In a second slide, she added, "We honor elders." Sometimes stress can cause misunderstandings. I read that line twice. "Stress," I said to the empty cabin, "did not pry my lock or rename my wires." Sabine took my phone, scanned the post, and gave it back like a doctor returning an X-ray. "We do not argue in comments," she said. We argue in filings. Noor, who had come by to check the lines, shook his head like a man who has seen docks buckle and still be blamed for weather. Paperwork does not travel by vibes, he muttered. It either exists or it does not. Before noon, sponsors began to peel away like stickers from wet wood. One wrote, "Given last night's safety concerns, we must withdraw." Another forwarded a chain that made my hands cold. "We believed the Harbor Trust had approved," their rep said. "We now understand there was no permit." Sabine printed every retraction and stacked them in a new folder. "Each message is an affidavit waiting to happen," she said. "They are doing our work for us." The city arrived on email stationery that took itself very seriously. Special Events and Public Assembly opened an administrative inquiry regarding unpermitted commercial use of waterfront property and potential public safety violations. They requested logs, ownership documents, and any correspondence related to the event. Marla filed her incident report to the same office and copied Sabine. The subject line was spare: "Immediate shutdown recommended." Seeing it, I felt the deck steady under my feet, even though I was in my kitchen, hands on a mug and the day still new. Adrian called while I was sorting receipts into neat stacks that smelled faintly of glue and old Sunday. "Mom," he said, tired already, "we need to handle this as a family." I breathed and let the river teach me the answer. "We tried quiet," I said. "Quiet," Meta Pry Bar. "You embarrassed us," he said. "You could have pulled me aside." "I did," I said. "You told me to behave," he sighed. "Look, the statement says the paperwork is in transit. It will clear this up." "The paperwork does not exist," I answered. "Stop asking a ghost to open a door." He shifted to weary reason. "You know how bad this looks for me," he said. "Clients read everything. Colleagues gossip. You have to meet me halfway." "Halfway to where?" I asked. "To pretending?" He did not answer. I heard the small static of his breath. "I can come by," he offered. "No cameras, no lawyers. We talk like mother and son." "We are mother and son," I said. "That is why I am telling you the truth." His voice cooled. "I thought you would protect us." "From the consequences of your choices?" I asked. "Or from the facts?" He hung up without choosing. An hour later, Sabine received something that put an extra weight into the room. A sponsor forwarded an email thread where Adrian had pitched the summit from his work account, signature block and all, promising exclusive access and the trust's blessing. The timestamps were during business hours. The tone was eager in a way I recognized from when he was 10 and thought you could bargain with math. Sabine placed the printout between us. "Conflict of interest," she said. "At minimum, a compliance issue." I traced my finger along my son's name. "He built bridges for a living," I said. "He should know better than to use the wrong span." I went for a walk so I would not say something I could not unsay. The docks had their ordinary faces on. Deeg was under a hatch with a wrench, elbow deep in something that would stop leaking if you convinced it to want a better life. He popped up when he heard my step. "You all right, Miss Moreno?" he asked. "I am as right as a line that refuses to be bent," I answered. He nodded like a man who has seen rope fail and hold and knows the difference lives in the weave. By afternoon, the press had sent polite sniffs. "We'd like your comment," one wrote. Another asked for the human side of a complicated moment. Sabine drafted a sentence that felt like a door closed with care. "We prioritize safety and consent on the water. We will cooperate fully with the city's inquiry and have no further comment at this time." "Short is merciful," she said. "Short leaves, no hooks." I sent her words and refused the calls. The river does not answer every pebble. Tamsin kept posting, a kind of frantic calm. She claimed a courier had misplaced a folder. She suggested that a certain elder had misremembered the reassignment process. In a late story, she said, "My husband tried to manage communications while under work pressure." I pictured Adrian reading that line and feeling grateful and injured at the same time. I pictured him looking at his phone and not calling me. Marla stopped by at dusk to clarify a line in her report. She stood on my deck and pointed without pointing. "If they had lit anything," she said, "the ember could have kissed that seam. Fire travels faster than denial." I thanked her. She shrugged. "I keep a list," she said. People who still care about the boring parts that keep everyone breathing. Your name is on it. I swallowed a very old feeling that sounded like being seen. Next morning, a package arrived at the harbor office addressed in a hurried hand. Inside was the velvet pouch with my brass compass. A note sat on top, shaky and sweet as a child's apology. So sorry. Took by mistake. Thought it was a prop. Please forgive. It was signed with Tamsin's sister's name, the same one printed across the bottom of her online story where my compass had winked behind a jar of glitter. Noor called me before touching anything. You want me to log chain? He asked. Yes, I said. Log chain. He wore gloves, photographed the exterior, the note, the pouch, the hinge nick. He placed the compass in a labeled evidence bag and recorded the time. We signed the line together. Do you want it back on your shelf? He asked. Not yet, I said. A return is not a repair. Sabine read the note once and put it beneath a clip. Mistake is a generous word, she said. We will let the facts decide its diet. I laughed despite myself. You feed the facts well, I said. They are picky eaters, she replied. They hate adjectives. The fireworks supplier answered Sabine's inquiry with corporate clarity. We do not authorize use on docks or near fuel lines. Purchaser, River Rise Collective. Payment, prepaid card. Pickup, Signature T. Read, order fulfilled 2 days prior. They attached the invoice and a photo of the pickup counter where Tamsin smiled at a clerk who did not know he was photographing a problem. Sabine printed everything and wrote Exhibit F in the corner. F for fireworks, she said, also for foolish. That afternoon, Adrian stood at the foot of my gangway with 2 coffees and a face that used to get him out of chores. Talk, he said, not quite asking. I met him halfway on the pier because halfway still counts as grace. He handed me a cup. I do not want your apology, I said. Then what do you want? He asked. I want you to stop treating your wants as laws, I said. He spread his hands. I am trying. I am stuck between a wife who is drowning and a mother who will not throw a rope. I will throw a rope, I said. It is braided from truth. Grab that. He laughed without humor. Truth does not pay for school or braces. Lies do not either, I said. They send invoices with interest. He stared at the river. She says you hate her, he said. I do not hate her, I answered. I hate what she did. I hate what you let her do. He flinched. I thought the trust approved, he said weakly. You thought because she told you to think, I said. You did not ask the person who would know. I am asking now, he said. Too late for the fireworks, I said. Not too late to choose a better sentence next time. He set the cup on the rail. So you will not drop this, he said. No, I said. I will not drop gravity to spare a falling plate. He left without hugging me. The coffee sat between us like a small, failed treaty. After he was gone, I poured it over the side and watched the surface wrinkle and smooth. The river does not keep what it cannot use. By evening, the inquiry had expanded to include the charity claim. The city wanted proof that River Rise existed. Sabine replied with a printout of the template site, the absent number, and the payment processor fine print. There is a difference, she wrote, between a cause and a costume. She included the prop house invoice for the laminates. The reply came fast. Understood. Please retain all materials. I slept better knowing a clerk had typed those words to us with the confidence of a person used to rules. Texts from numbers I did not know began to arrive, small flares of either sympathy or warning. Some said, proud of you. Some said, family is family. One declared, you ruined her career, as if careers could be ruined by the act of not committing fraud. I silenced the thread and set my phone face down. The deck around me was quiet except for the sounds I trust. Water, rope, the occasional gull with an opinion. Sabine came by with a neat stack and a look that belonged to a woman who sleeps on trains when she must. We are holding, she said. They are spinning. The city will take its time. In the meantime, we anchor. Anchor how? I asked. With discipline, she said. Maintain the chain. Keep your statements spare. Meet every ask with a document, not a feeling. I nodded. Feelings can row later, I said. Tonight they sit. As the sun dropped, I set the compass on the table in its sealed bag and looked at it through plastic. I remembered my mother teaching me to read it, her finger tapping north like it was a prayer, Pedro laughing when the lid stuck and his thumbnail freed it. Grief rose, did its small, predictable work, and retreated. I said out loud, "I wish you had met our grandson as a better man," and then I put the compass back in the evidence box and closed the lid. I am not made of iron. When the dock lights came on, a loneliness moved through me like a slow tide. I let it. I did not feed it. I ran my hand along the rail I sanded last winter and told myself the obvious truth that still needed saying. I would rather be alone with the river than together in a lie. The water answered in small yeses against the hull. We listened to each other, and it was enough for the night. Night pressed soft and merciless on the deck, and the boat breathed the way sleeping things do. I had swept for hours, but glitter still clung to the grout of my mosaic like frost the sun refuses to take. Every fleck was a boast, a tiny brag that said, "We were here, we took your quiet." I could not remove them without a chisel, and fury is a bad tool for fine work. I sat at the table and watched the last specks glitter, and I asked aloud the question I had dodged all day. Do I spare them for the children? They are not here, I said to myself, but their shadows are. The children are not mine to save, yet they are the only people who never chose any of this. I imagined their faces if schoolmothers whispered, and I wondered whether mercy was a kind of maintenance. Then I pictured a candle near a fuel line, and my hand closed into a fist on the table. Mercy without safety is permission for harm. I walked the perimeter once, touching rails and knots, reciting names of parts like prayers: cleat, fairlead, stanchion, seam. The river answered in small sounds that did not flatter me and did not leave me. I thought of the compass in the sealed bag, and of the note that called theft a mistake. I thought of the word grandmother, and how it can be used as a bribe. Near midnight, Noor's light burned in the harbor office, steady as a lantern left in a window for sailors. I walked over because I could not keep sitting with my ghosts and their good arguments. He opened the door before I knocked, which is a kind of friendship I still know how to accept. "You cleaned," he said, seeing the glitter on my cuffs. "I tried," I said. "It will take time." We sat by the window that looks onto the water where the current writes a moving sentence. Noor poured tea and let the first silence do its work. "Talk," he said at last. "I do not know which line to hold," I told him. "I can end this now if I let go of the part that teaches." He watched the tide catch a floating cup and carry it toward a snag. "Rivers are systems," he said. "Everywhere there is a channel and a shoal, and the difference is not moral, it is survival. You mark the channel not because you hate the shoal, but because you want everyone to get home." "If I drop the complaints, the noise stops," I said. "If I press, the children will suffer in the kind of way people like to talk about at dinner." He shook his head slowly. "Harm is not measured by volume," he said. "The quiet harm was the plan to rename your life with a sponsor and to stage explosives on a seam. The loud harm is the complaint that follows." I set my palms on the window glass and felt the faint buzz of the building, the little hum that old places keep. "I do not want vengeance," I said. "I want a boundary that even my absence can defend." "Then build a boundary that teaches," he answered. "Not a wall, a shoreline." We spoke of shorelines the way old mechanics talk about torque. A shoreline gives and holds, moves and remains, says come this far and no farther without turning the sea into a cage. He told me about the captain who ignored the markers one winter and put his bow onto a bar that did not forgive. "We added 2 more buoys after that," he said. "People called it overkill until nothing bad happened for a long while." "So I set buoys," I said. "One buoy marks truth, one marks safety, one marks service." Noor smiled like a man who has named a star with a child. "Draw me your line," he said. So I did. I told him I would not ask for prison, and I would not ask for a public spectacle past what the law required. I would ask for a bar from waterfront event management for a measured season, enough time to cool the impulse to dress risk as kindness. I would ask for mandated training in crowd safety, electrical loads, and the sober rules of pyrotechnics. I would ask for service with the trust that is not performative, the sort that cleans ladders, paints lines, records permits, and teaches others how not to burn a pier. I would ask for a written apology that names the acts and renounces the disguises. "That is not soft," Noor said. "That is structure." "Structure is kindness to the future," I said. He nodded and wrote 3 words on a pad he keeps for tides and good sentences. Truth, safety, service. I walked back to the boat with the plan rubbing at my ribs like a useful stone. The deck was empty and polite, exactly the way a place looks after a party that did not earn its joy. I swept again, and the last glitter held, stubborn as some people's stories. I whispered to it, "You are not stars," and it dimmed because even lies tire when named. I thought of my grandchildren and made a promise I could keep. I would not use them as shields or as spears. Sabine met me on the deck with a face that told me she had slept and that the sleep had been brief. "Do you want to push for charges alone, or do you want to steer this toward instruction?" she asked. "Instruction," I said. "I am not a court. I am a shoreline." She listened the way a good lawyer listens, with her pen quiet. "Propose terms," she said. "I will carry them into the hearing, and I will make the case that education prevents the next fire." We drafted the terms at the table, where someone had staged a gratitude circle, like a wreath on a door they did not own. 2 years barred from waterfront event management. Completion of certified training in crowd safety, electrical load planning, extension cord rules, generator placement, and pyrotechnic basics. A written apology filed with the harbor office and read aloud at a trust meeting, naming the acts plainly, no inflation and no euphemisms. 100 hours of service with the trust, not photo-ready tasks but real work with elders, inventory, sanding rails, painting safety lines, cleaning ladders, helping the harbor post materials that explain permits in friendly words. A public commitment to leave the Rosalind unbranded and intact. Adrian would take a compliance course through his firm and sign a letter promising never to use company tools for personal pitches again. "This is heavy," Sabine said, "but it is not cruel." "Cruelty would be to let them keep the costume and call it growth," I answered. She drafted a clean memo and attached the exhibits, the invoices, the stills, and the quiet photographs of glitter in the grout like a warning constellation. "We offer this path," she wrote, "in the interest of safety, education, and the dignity of public spaces." We sent it to the city, to the trust board, and to the inbox that Tamsin uses when she wants to sound official. Then the dark part came, the one where plans are made and no one claps. I sat on the deck with the evidence box and the sealed compass and let loneliness run its small tide through me. I wrote a letter I did not send to the children, telling them that love is not the same as permission. I told them, boundaries are the places that let families keep happening. I signed it with a heart I cannot draw well and put it in a drawer with old charts. Near dawn, I found Noor checking bollards before fishermen woke the pier. He looked at my face and did not ask for proof. "The night is a hard teacher," he said. "It is," I said, "but it teaches clean." He touched the rail like a blessing and went on with his rounds. By noon, the city replied that our proposal would be taken up in the hearing and that training recommendations were welcome. Sabine asked me to make a list that did not pull punches and did not try to humiliate. I wrote modules the way a captain writes orders on a rough day. Electrical loads for beginners. Exit routes as a love language. Fuel lines are not a vibe. Pyrotechnics belong to licensed adults only. Permits are kindness in paper clothes. In the afternoon, I carried the list to the office and watched Noor pin it to a cork board that has held storms and bake sales. "That will preach," he said. "I do not need a sermon. I need a culture." He tapped the words with one finger and said, "Culture is just many small sermons told by the work." When evening laid a soft lid on the river, I felt the choice settle, heavy and right. I would not trade truth for the comfort of being called kind, and I would not weaponize love. Accountability first, education next, service, and let the shoreline hold when my voice grows small. The harbor board met in the old boathouse where varnish lives in the rafters, and every chair has listened to storms. The room was full without being crowded. Dock folk with folded arms, 2 reporters who smelled like deadline, a row of elders in clean caps, and the polite hush that happens when water people agree to let paper speak. I sat beside Sabine at a narrow table facing the dais. Noor stood by the side wall with a laptop and the projector he treats like a lantern. Marla waited with her clipboard across her knees, patient as a tide change. The chair called us first. Sabine rose, laid our evidence binder flat, and gave the board a measured sentence. We will show chain of custody for physical and digital exhibits, standard harbor procedure, fire code violations observed in situ, and misrepresentations concerning permits and partnership. She tapped the spine. Tabs are numbered, seals are initialed. The order reflects time. She opened to the affidavit page and had me swear the ordinary oath. The notary's stamp made that small, authoritative kiss I have come to love. Sabine slid the first sleeves across a photo of my splintered lock, the empty velvet pouch, the tablet schedule, promising fireworks over fuel, and a Q&A with Lila, if she behaves. She identified each, date-stamped the corners, and pointed to the tamper tape. Documented by owner, received by counsel, notarized. Cameras, the chair said. Noor connected the projector. Harbor office retains gangway and fuel dock video for 30 days, he testified. Time drift is known and logged. 1 minute, 34 seconds last week. Corrections noted on export. He clicked. The wall showed the quiet geometry of midnight. Fuel dock 211A. M. Corrected, he said. We watched Tamsin let herself in, hood up, laminate turned inward like a costume off duty. We watched her peel and swap labels at the breaker panel, then haul long boxes marked PYRO kits across the planks that cover the fuel line. Standard procedure? A board member asked. We do not relabel panels without licensed work, Noor said. We never stage ignition sources over fuel pathways. We inventory boxes on and off. We record permits before events, not after. Marla rose with a nod from the chair. Fire marshal report, she said, voice steady. Visual findings. Extension cords chained into a single outlet cluster code violation. A fabric banner zip-tied across aft egress obstruction. Pyrotechnic trays set directly above the fuel line cover unacceptable. No written safety plan. No licensed pyro operator present. Shutdown performed on-site. She set printed photos on the table, cords snaking like reckless vines, the banner across the stairs, the tray's ugly silhouette over the seam that has kept me honest for 12 years. I did not come to embarrass anyone, she added. I came to keep people breathing. Sabine moved us to the next tab. River Rise Collective, she said, and let the template website appear, all stock smiles and a donation button that led to a third-party processor. No EIN on registry, she told the board. No filings in the state database. Name exists only as costume. She slid the printout forward. We are not asking you to police the internet. We are showing absence where an approval process depends on presence. A hand went up along the back row. The chair recognized Deeg with a nod that said, "Working hands are welcome." He didn't sit at the table. He stood where mechanics stand close enough to the machine to hear it think. Diego Santos, he said. Dock mechanic. My truck faces Miss Moreno's slip. Dashcam caught motion where there shouldn't be. He glanced at me and then at Tamsin, who sat 2 rows behind us, chin high. She told me there might be work if I looked away, he added quietly. I looked, instead. Noor cued the clip. Timestamp, 2:11 a.m. Same figure, same hood, same furtive carefulness. The board watched the angles align, dash cam, gangway, fuel dock like a constellation finding its pattern. Thank you, Mr. Santos, the chair said. Your hesitation is noted, and so is your choice. Sabine turned a page and placed 2 letters side by side. Prop laminate vendor confirmation, she said. Lanyards and lure invoice to Reed Creative LLC, 10 harbor-style partner passes, fulfilled last Wednesday. She read the cheerful item description hologram pattern. For content event and let the room feel the cheap weight of credentials bought by the dozen. Micro reveal 7, she said without drama. They purchased the look of authority. Next, the forged memo. Sabine didn't call an expert. She brought exemplars. Board chair's signature has a looped R that drops on the 3rd stroke, she said, holding the authentic letter under the document camera. On the fake, the loop lifts and leans habit cannot be imitated by tracing. She traced both R's in the air with her pen so the shape lived for a moment above the table. Also margins, spacing, and a bylaw citation that does not exist. She let the falsehoods sit in daylight. Then, the social posts. Noor's niece, credited by name because the young deserve it, had compiled a sheet of timestamps and geotags. Sabine presented it simply. Content, claiming approved by trust, was posted at 4:09 p.m., she said. Geotag places the poster on the dock. Alleged approval email is timestamped 6:37 p.m., after the claim. Metadata shows edits to captions, but initial text remains in the platform's log. Micro Reveal 8. Backdated legitimacy. She laid the paper beside the laminate invoice and the fake memo, 3 kinds of pretend kneeling together. The chair took a breath the room could feel. "Counsel," she said to the other table, where Tamsin sat with a young man in a jacket that hoped to be a lawyer. He cleared his throat and said, "Misunderstanding, 3 ways." Tamsin stood without waiting for him. The headset was gone. The performance voice remained. "We came to build community," she said. "We thought we had approval. My husband told me the trust was on board. If there were gaps, they were clerical. Lila is beloved, but she can be forgetful under stress." She looked at me with manufactured pity. I never wanted a fight. "Then why the pry bar?" I asked. "Because sometimes a question is the whole speech." She flinched, then leaned into the thing she knows best. "You're being cruel," she said. "You didn't have to make a public scene. You could have called me. We are family." Her voice softened for the room. "This is generational. New ways scare elders." I tried to bring her story to the people. She punished me for trying. I stood, because sitting would have looked like a bow. "I am not cruel," I said, level as a spirit level on a plank. "I am the shoreline. Shorelines do not hate the sea. They tell the sea where the town begins." I placed my palm on the binder, on my own receipts and photographs. "You staged explosives over a fuel line and covered an exit with cloth. You bought the look of authority and called it permission. You took my compass and called it a prop. Then you said paperwork was in transit while the fire code waited with its hands out. I did not punish you. I interrupted you." Adrian rose in the 3rd row, tie askew, eyes bright with a drowning man's logic. "Mom," he said, voice shaking. "Could you please be Mom right now? Not the trust. Not the captain. Just Mom." He turned to the board. "She was always like this with rules. She thinks discipline is love." "Discipline is love," I said gently. "And love is not the same as letting you burn a dock because sponsors liked your deck." I faced him fully. "I am your mother. This is me being her." He looked down at his hands. Tamsin tried again. "We'll take training," she said quickly. "We'll apologize. We'll do community hours. But please don't ban me. My work is events. You're taking my life." Marla answered first, which surprised me, and also didn't. "We ask carpenters to train before ladders," she said. "We ask cooks to learn grease fires. We will ask you not to set sparks over fuel. That is not taking your life. That is returning it." Sabine nodded. "We submitted a restorative proposal," she told the board. 2-year bar from waterfront event management. Mandated safety education in electrical loading, egress, and pyrotechnics. Service hours with the trust that are not performative. Written apology naming the acts. Compliance training for Mr. Moreno regarding personal use of company systems. She didn't raise her voice. She arranged facts into a place to stand. A board member with wind-burned cheeks leaned into his mic. "Mr. Rahman," he asked Noor, "is this consistent with harbor practice?" "Yes," Noor said. "We correct behavior in public where risk was public. We teach. We protect elders and children and anyone who does not know the difference between glow and flame." Another member, an old ferrywoman whose hands matched mine, addressed me. "Mrs. Moreno, will this satisfy your line?" "It will hold it," I said, "and it will teach the next hand that grabs for it." The chair conferred with her colleagues, heads bent like gulls examining a net. She looked up. "We accept council's exhibits and findings," she said. "We acknowledge fire marshal recommendations. We adopt the restorative terms as board recommendation to the city and to the trust's enforcement arm, with immediate effect regarding waivers." She turned to Tamsin. "You are barred from managing waterfront events under our jurisdiction for 2 years, effective today." Training is mandatory. Service as listed. A written apology will be filed and presented at the next public meeting. To Adrian, your firm has been notified of the emails sent from your account. We urge corrective training. Tamsin made a small animal sound. Her counsel squeezed her arm and whispered something about appeal. The elders in the caps did not clap. Harbor folk do not clap at boundaries, they nod. I felt the room nod. One more thing, the chair added. Return of property. Noor retrieved the bagged compass, held it up so the nick in the hinge caught the light, then handed it to the clerk for logging. Chain of custody complete, he said. Owner may reclaim after meeting. I looked at Tamsin. You may speak last if you wish, I told her. And it was not cruelty. It was the rope you offer, so a person can test their own knot. She lifted her chin. I'm sorry we upset her, she said, and the room heard the missing nouns. Sabine didn't look at me. She didn't have to. The board heard them too. I took my turn only because the chair nodded once. I do not need a perfect apology, I said. I need safer docks and less pretending. I am leaving my boat to apprentices when I am gone. I want them to inherit a culture, not a costume. I let the sentences end where they should. The chair tapped the gavel once, a sound like a good cleat taking strain. Motion carried, she said. This session is adjourned. People stood the way people stand when they've watched a near miss and want to go home and check their stoves. Deeg came by and touched his cap without taking it off. You held, he said. We all did, I answered. Marla shook my hand. Teach the class with me, she said. I will bring the code, you bring the stories. Yes, I said, and meant it. Adrian lingered. Is there any lane left where I can fix this? He asked softly. Yes, I said, the one where you stop asking me to lie. He nodded once, eyes wet, and left before the room could decide what to think of him. Tamsin followed, shoulders tight inside a blazer that had looked like armor on my deck and looked like costume here. Noor handed me the unsealed compass at last, warm from its bag. I set my thumb on the old nick, and it turned north with the casual certainty of things that do not need applause. Outside, the river was ordinary again. Banners had been taken down, the projector was packed, the boathouse door creaked, grateful to be useful. Sabine slipped the binder into her satchel. Next, she said. Next is doing the work we asked for, I answered, in public, with patience. And then? Then I will go home, I said, and sweep glitter out of grout until it gives up. She smiled, tired and bright. We walked the pier without speaking, and the boards under us said what docs always say when people have chosen the better line: hold fast. The outcomes arrived the way weather does on the river, first as a smell of ink, then as a breeze of envelopes, finally as a change in pressure you can feel in your bones. Sabine spread the notices on my mosaic table and tapped each one with the tip of her pen. City enforcement, she said. Civil fines assessed for unpermitted commercial use and life safety violations. Payment schedules enclosed. She moved to the next sheet. Mandated safety training modules, electrical load planning, egress management, generator placement, extinguishers, and a pyrotechnics primer. Completion required before any future application is reviewed. She tapped a third. 2-year bar from waterfront event management under harbor jurisdiction. I breathed out, slow. That is a shoreline. Noor arrived with a copy of the trust's decision, stamped and plain. Waivers revoked pending probation, he said. During the bar, no borrowing of legitimacy. After, only upon clean record and real paperwork. He watched my face the way dock folk watch cleats take strain. You asked for a boundary that could stand when you are not standing, he said. This reads like one. I put my palm on the stamp. Ink is kinder than rumor, I said. It teaches without shouting. Adrian's company sent their letter next, corporate and careful. He had used his work account to court sponsors on company time. He had attached trust claims without verification. The compliance team required an ethics refresher and a written acknowledgement of policy. I read the lines twice. I wanted to call him and say, "This correction is not cruelty." Instead, I dialed the person who knows how to put hard truths into simple sentences. "Noor," I said, "what is the sentence a son can hear without breaking?" He did not hesitate. "Try this," he said. "Discipline is a bridge, not a wall. I installed the new locks with my own hands because touch repairs more than metal. The cylinders slid in with the modest pride of tools that fit. The cameras blinked their small red yeses, watching the breaker panel and the wheelhouse door in a patient, non-judgmental way. I hired a dock watcher from Noor's List, a woman who has worked the night shift since her 20s and understands that vigilance is quiet. "What is the job?" she asked. "To notice," I said. "And to write it down." She nodded like a person who has carried radios and secrets and prefers paper. Marla stopped by to walk the deck minutely and mark the last fixes on a modest checklist. "Clear," she said at the aft stairs. "Clear at the outlet. Clear at the fuel line cover where the pyro trays had once sat like mistakes rehearsing." She lifted her gaze. "When we do our training, you tell the room about that seam," she said. "Give them the story with the rules." I put my hand on the metal and felt the boat's cool answer. "I will," I said. "Rules are stories our bodies remember." The trust posted its public note: neutral words, no names, an emphasis on safety and process. I read it 3 times, grateful for a tone that did not perform triumph. Noor studied the phrasing as if it were a chart and grunted with approval. "That kind of plain talk keeps us from having to shout later," he said. "Sabine sent our restorative proposal to the city as a reminder that consequences can teach. They accepted nearly all of it," she said. "If there is mercy in the harbor, it is organized." I updated my will on a Tuesday afternoon while gulls insulted each other over bait. The attorney read the new line aloud, as if speaking it could set the keel. "The vessel Rosalind shall pass in full to the Maritime Apprenticeship Program," he said, accompanied by the maintenance logs and the binder of receipts. He looked up. "Any conditions?" "Any conditions. Only that she remain a working classroom," I said. "No renaming, no brand, no weddings on the fuel line." He smiled despite himself and slid the paper across the desk. "Sign here," he said. The pen felt heavier than usual and steadier. "For whom are you doing this?" he asked gently. "For the kid who needs a first deck," I said. "And for the woman I was when I bought rust with tip money." We repaired small things that felt large. Noor matched a faded safety stripe with fresh paint. Deeg replaced a tired cleat bolt and explained washers to a teenager who watched like he was being handed a map. "A good washer spreads load," Deeg told him. "It's small and saves the board. Remember that when you think your job is nothing." I wiped glitter out of grout with a toothbrush until the last flecks surrendered. "You were never stars," I told them. "You were noise." Then came a letter, handwritten in the careful script Adrian learned in 3rd grade, the year I showed him how to coil rope, and he taught me patience with glue. "Mom," it began, "the kids miss you. They ask when they can visit the boat. Tamsin and I are learning our lesson. Maybe we can try again." I turned the paper over as if the rest might be hiding on the back. It wasn't. I pressed the letter flat and read it until the words went quiet. "You are asking for comfort," I said to the page. "I am keeping a boundary." I did not answer. Love is not measured by speed. Tamsin sent her apology by email as the board required. It was careful and incomplete. "I'm sorry for upsetting you," it said. "I believed we were approved. I will take the training." The nouns were still missing. Sabine advised no reply beyond acknowledgement. I typed 2 sentences that fit on 1 line. "Received. Please complete all training and service as ordered." I sat with the strange mercy of not chasing her into understanding. Noor found me later and said, "You cannot teach a lesson a person will not take." I said, "I know." He said, "You taught the harbor. That will do." The fines were paid on schedules we did not see, the training list filled with names from crews and vendors who had watched the hearing online and decided to learn before the next siren. Marla booked a room with a projector and a stack of codes. I brought the photographs of the breaker panel and the seam. We taught standing up. When someone asked why exits mattered more than mood, I said, "Because people you love might need them. Because strangers you are responsible for will thank you by still breathing." A young planner wiped her eyes, then wrote the rule down in block letters. "I did not know," she said. "You know now," Marla answered, kind without softness. The dock watcher's log filled with small nothings that made me feel safe. Midnight. Dog on leash, 2:12. Rain, 3:30. Gull drama, 4:05. Vendor truck lost, then found. The cameras recorded nothing interesting, which is what cameras are born to do. Noor added one more sticker to the breaker panel. Labels are not decor. He left the Sharpie in a cup and winked. For the next person tempted by theater, he said. On a quiet morning, Sabine closed her binder on the case and tied it with a ribbon of twine that smelled faintly of hemp and Sunday. "We are past the fire," she said. "Now we do the gardening." I laughed, surprised by the sudden lightness. "You mean sweeping," I said, "and teaching." "Same thing," she said. "Tidy is what justice looks like when it is done." I took the compass out of its bag at last. The hinge nick found my thumb like a key finding its lock. North settled where it always does, patient as prayer. I stood on the bow and held it up, then set it on the shelf where it had rested before someone mistook my history for a prop. "We're home," I told it. The boat creaked her agreement. At dusk, Noor walked through with his clipboard and stopped by the wheel. "How are you?" he asked. "Tired," I said, "and free." He nodded as if those words were coordinates and wrote nothing. "What is next?" he asked. "Apprentices," I said. "Someone needs to learn how to sand without getting bored." He grinned. "We'll find the right hands." The river does not clap. It agrees quietly. On the night the board posted the final notice and the city marked the case resolved, I made a simple supper and ate it on the aft deck. The air tasted like rope and tide. I thought about answering Adrian's letter and chose not to, because silence sometimes holds the length of a boundary better than words. "I am still your mother," I told the twilight. "I am also the captain. Both roles require lines." I turned off the work lights and let the small lamps ring the table. Water light trembled across the tiles, those soft flickers old sailors call phosphenes when the sea paints your eyes. The mosaic took the shimmer and gave it back, gentle and alive. I rested my hands in my lap and let breathing be my only job. The harbor settled. Somewhere a late gull laughed like a child who forgot the punchline. I smiled and answered with my own small piece of quiet. "Underestimate an old captain if you like," I said to the darkening bend. "The river knows better." Thank you for watching until the end. If this story touched your heart even a little, that's our greatest joy. If you'd like, please share your thoughts in the comments. We'll keep bringing you stories that stay with you, so please consider subscribing to the channel. See you in the next video.